He was a businessman, a community volunteer, a man who dressed as a clown for children's parties. But behind the grease paint and charm was something monstrous. John Wayne Gacy, one of America's most prolific and sadistic serial killers. This is his story. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, March the 17th, 1942. From the outside, he seemed destined for an ordinary, even successful life, but his childhood was marked by pain and dysfunction. His father, John Stanley Gacy, was an abusive alcoholic who regularly beat his son and belittled him, calling him weak and worthless. Gacy's mother, Marion, tried to protect him, but the damage was done. As a boy, Gacy suffered from fainting spells and heart problems. His father accused him of faking illness. Gacy craved approval, but never received it. This rejection, some argue, shaped the monster he would later become. By the late 1960s, Gacy was married, had 2 children, and was managing KFC restaurants in Iowa. He was active in local politics and civic groups, but beneath the surface, there was something deeply wrong. In 1968, Gacy was convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage boy. He served just 18 months in prison before being released. Instead of reforming, Gacy grew darker. He learned how to wear a mask of respectability, charm, and success, while hiding his violent urges. After his release, Gacy moved back to Chicago. He started a construction business, performed as Pogo the Clown at hospitals and charity events, and hosted neighborhood parties at his home on Summerdale Avenue. To his neighbors, he was friendly, hardworking, and trustworthy. He was the guy who lent out tools, plowed snowy driveways, and hired local boys for work. But Gacy's private life was very different. He began luring young men and boys with promises of jobs or quick cash. Once inside his home, his victims rarely made it out alive. By the early 1970s, young men in the area began disappearing. Runaways, hustlers, boys from troubled homes. Police often dismissed the cases, but the truth was horrifying. Gacy had already begun killing. Gacy's killings followed a chilling ritual. He would lure a boy into his home with the promise of work. Then he offered them drinks, marijuana, or simply a chance to hang out. Soon Gacy would suggest a trick, the handcuff game. He would show the boy how he could slip out of the cuffs, laughing, making it seem harmless. Then he'd persuade the boy to try. Once the cuffs snapped shut, the game was over. Gacy's smile would vanish, and he would whisper, "You're not going anywhere." The victims were tortured, raped, and strangled. Sometimes Gacy would use a rope as a tourniquet, twisting it tighter and tighter. Afterward, he disposed of their bodies in the most macabre way possible, by burying them in the crawl space beneath his own home. The crawl space under Gacy's house became a mass grave. He dug trenches, layering body upon body. At night, neighbors sometimes complained of foul odors. Gacy explained it away, saying it was just dampness or a plumbing problem. In reality, the smell was death itself, seeping from the ground. Over the years, Gacy buried at least 29 victims beneath his home. Others were dumped in rivers or elsewhere. For nearly a decade, Gacy continued his double life: businessman, clown, community leader, and one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. But by the late 1970s, his carefully constructed mask of normality was starting to crack. December 11th, 1978, Des Plaines, Illinois. 15-year-old Robert Peast was working a shift at a local pharmacy. That evening, he mentioned to a coworker that he was going to talk to a contractor about a job that paid well. The contractor's name? John Wayne Gacy. Robert never came home. His disappearance sparked alarm. Robert came from a loving, stable family. He wasn't a runaway. Police began investigating immediately, and their trail led straight to Gacy. When officers first questioned Gacy, he was calm, confident, even arrogant. He denied meeting Robert, but detectives weren't convinced. As they dug deeper, they discovered a chilling pattern. Gacy's name kept surfacing in connection with missing boys. Soon, police surveillance was placed on him around the clock, and what they were about to uncover would shock the world. John Wayne Gacy had hidden behind a mask of normality for years, but the disappearance of one teenage boy, Robert Peast, would pull that mask away and expose the horror beneath. Des Plaines police quickly zeroed in on Gacy. Detectives checked his criminal record and found his 1968 conviction for sexual assault of a teenage boy. Red flags were everywhere. Surveillance teams followed Gacy day and night. They saw him drink heavily, visit bars, and even try to befriend young men, all while under watch. Gacy, arrogant as ever, seemed to relish the cat-and-mouse game. He invited officers into restaurants, bought them meals, even joked with them. He thought he was untouchable, but behind the scenes, investigators were gathering evidence. Witness statements, odd details about his home, and the stench neighbors had long complained about. On December 13th, police searched Gacy's home for the first time. They found curious items: handcuffs, books on homosexuality and sadism, a strange wooden board with holes drilled into it, and a driver's license belonging to someone other than Gacy. There wasn't enough to arrest him yet, but the evidence was piling up. As the pressure mounted, Gacy began to unravel. He drank more, slept less, and rambled to friends about his supposed innocence. But on December 20th, things took a darker turn. After days of surveillance, Gacy invited one of his lawyers to dinner. He confessed to killing maybe 30 people. His lawyer, stunned, realized this was no drunken boast. Gacy was beginning to break. Meanwhile, detectives were closing in. A second search warrant for Gacy's home was issued. This time, officers were determined to find the truth. December 21st, 1978. Police descended into the crawl space beneath Gacy's house. Almost immediately, they noticed the soil looked disturbed, a shovel cut into the earth. Within moments, they uncovered human remains. The stench of death filled the air. It was undeniable. John Wayne Gacy's home was a burial ground. Detectives quickly realized the scale of what they had discovered. This wasn't one body, it was dozens. Over the next days, police pulled victim after victim from beneath the house. Each body told the story of a life stolen, a family devastated, a community haunted. On December 22, 1978, John Wayne Gacy was arrested. At first, he denied everything, but as evidence mounted and the bodies kept coming, he began to talk. Gacy admitted to killing at least 33 young men and boys. Most were buried in his crawl space. Others were thrown into rivers. He described his murders with chilling detachment, as if he were discussing business transactions. He referred to his victims as things rather than people. The media exploded with the story. A respected businessman, a community volunteer, a clown at children's parties, but behind the painted smile was one of the worst serial killers in American history. Gacy's trial began in February 1980. The courtroom was packed. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence. The remains of 29 victims from his home, 4 more found elsewhere, and chilling testimony from survivors who had escaped his grasp. Gacy's defense argued insanity. They painted him as a man suffering from multiple personality disorder, incapable of controlling his actions. But the jury saw through it. The pattern of his crimes, the planning, the concealment. It was calculated, methodical, deliberate. On March 13, 1980, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on 33 counts of murder. Gacy was sentenced to death. For 14 years, Gacy sat on death row at Menard Correctional Center in Illinois. He gave interviews, painted disturbing clown portraits, and continued to insist that others were responsible for the murders. But the evidence was undeniable. The blood was on his hands. John Wayne Gacy had lived 2 lives, the community man and the killer beneath the mask. Now stripped of his lies, he waited on death row, knowing the clock was ticking. At Menard Correctional Center, Gacy became inmate number C01110, but instead of remorse, he seemed to revel in the attention his crimes brought him. He granted interviews to journalists, lawyers, even amateur criminologists. He complained about the media, claimed he was innocent, and blamed accomplices that never existed. Most disturbingly, Gacy took up painting. His most infamous works, distorted, colorful portraits of clowns, including Pogo the Clown, his own performance persona. These paintings sold for thousands of dollars, creating outrage among victims' families. For 14 years, Gacy fought his sentence with appeals, legal maneuvers, and media stunts. But the courts never wavered. The evidence was overwhelming. On May 9, 1994, the state of Illinois carried out Gacy's execution by lethal injection. Crowds gathered outside the prison, some demanding justice, others protesting capital punishment. Inside, Gacy spent his final hours with family and a Catholic priest. His last meal was a bizarre choice: a dozen deep-fried shrimp, a bucket of KFC chicken, French fries, strawberries, and a Diet Coke. At 12:58 a.m., May 10th, Gacy was pronounced dead. His final words, spat out with defiance, were chilling. "Kiss my ass." The man who had lived behind masks, father, businessman, clown, killer, had finally been unmasked forever. In the years since Gacy's death, the horror of his crimes continues to haunt America. His house on Summerdale Avenue was demolished in 1979, replaced with an empty lot. But neighbors still speak of nightmares, of the smell, of the memories. Some of his clown paintings remain in circulation, macabre relics of evil that some collectors covet, while others burn in protest. For families of the victims, the scars never healed. Many never received full closure, as some of the bodies were too decomposed to be positively identified for years. John Wayne Gacy has become more than a killer. He has become a symbol of evil hidden in plain sight, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't lurk in shadows. They live next door. They shake your hand. They make your children laugh. And they wear a smile while burying bodies beneath their own home. The story of John Wayne Gacy is not just about one man's evil. It's about complacency, missed warnings, and the fragile mask of normality. It's about the lives of 33 young men and boys, stolen, silenced, and buried in darkness. But their voices are not forgotten. Their memory stands as a warning and as a demand for vigilance. Because evil, when hidden behind a mask, is at its most dangerous. This was the story of John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries. And remember, trust the mask at your own risk.